Раз, раз, два, три.
Раз, два. Раз, два, три. Раз, два, три. Раз, два, три, четыре. Раз, раз, два, три. Раз, раз, раз. Раз, два, три. Раз, два. Нет?
Нормально, нормально. Менять? Сюда?
Просто запасные.
Раз, раз, два, три. Раз.
Amanda, can you hear me? That's perfect. Now we should switch it on. We don't see your picture, but it's fine. I think it will go through. So once, as you can hear as well, it's fine. Can you just say a couple of words now? Okay, then we'll start with the slides and we'll project slides. So your slides are on the screen, and we will start as soon as the conference will continue. Just hang up. Yes.
Уважаемые коллеги, давайте мы будем начинать завершать.
Dear colleagues, let us start our final session. And this year, the organization committee of the conference decided to start our digitalization, not only to talk about this, and now we'll have the historical moment for the first time at the plenary session. We will speak with the help of digital technologies with our colleagues from the US and with Amanda Di Vercelli, who is head of the educational program of the World Bank for Early Childhood Development. I hope we'll have no technical problems, and we will hear Amanda now.
Yes.
Hear you. Amanda, hear you. Can you hear us?
Аманда, вы нас слышите?
Yes. Great. Soon, I think it's everything is in 5 minutes.
Первый эффект от цифровизации – это развитие терпения, произвольности и других регуляторных функций.
Уважаемые коллеги, цифровизация – дело новое, поэтому, особенно когда она происходит на большом расстоянии, все становится гораздо сложнее, чем задумывалось.
Amanda, can you hear us now?
Yes, I hear you. Да, я вас слышу.
So, Amanda, you can start. The audience will hear you, and then you need to.
Аудитория вас будет слышать.
No, okay. So go ahead. You just speak as you present.
Вы просто делайте спокойно свою презентацию в своем режиме.
Go ahead.
Okay, Tigran, I'm sorry, I don't hear you well at all.
Я
Are
не
you telling me
очень
to
хорошо
start speaking?
вас слышу. Я думаю, что мне можно начинать говорить.
Okay.
Да.
Great.
Хорошо, тогда
Okay,
начинаем.
thank you, everybody.
Спасибо всем.
My name is Amanda Devercelli. I'm
Меня
the global
зовут
lead for early
Аманда
childhood
Деверчелли.
development at the World Bank.
Я возглавляю направление
And I'm very sorry for the
развития
delay in
дошкольного
getting things up
образования
and running. And I'm
от
sorry I can't
Всемирного
be there in person, but it's a pleasure
банка.
to be there with you
Для
virtually.
меня огромное удовольствие работать
If I
сегодня
can
с
today,
вами.
I'd just like to take about
Я
20
бы
minutes to share
хотела
with you some of the latest evidence on early childhood education that we're using at the bank to inform our investments in early childhood. We're seeing a real increase in demand from countries around the world for more investments in early childhood, and we're delighted to work with countries to help meet this demand. So let's move to the first slide. Well, I guess it's slide number 2, for whoever's moving the slides for me. This is a slide that shows scores in PISA, which is the test of children's math and reading scores at age 15 done around the world, mostly in middle-income and upper-income countries. And what you're seeing on the screen, each of the blue bars represents scores of children broken down by level of income in the country. So you have high income, upper middle income, and then lower middle income countries. And on one side, which I think will probably be your left side, you'll see scores for children who had more than a year of early childhood education compared to children who had none. And on the right side, you'll see children who had less than a year of early childhood education compared to none. And what you see in both situations is a huge difference in scores. So those blue bars are the difference in scores. And what you're seeing is children who have more than a year of early childhood education in lower middle income countries tend to score 82 points higher in their math scores at age 15 than children who had no early childhood education. And the difference in scores is double that of kids who had 1 year or less of early childhood. And we see this relationship in 63 out of the 65 countries that took PISA in 2012. So it's a very substantial, very significant relationship. Next slide, please. This slide is showing you a similar pattern for reading scores. So again, what it's showing you is that children who attended early childhood education tend to score higher in reading at age 15. If they had more than a year compared to less than a year, they tend to score double as high in the score difference. And the relationship and the score difference is strongest in lower middle income countries. So this is again reinforcing this idea that children who benefit from early childhood education have lifelong impacts and better scores in reading and math as adolescents. Next slide. This is just a heat map that is showing you enrollment in early learning increasing rapidly in low and middle income countries around the world. And you can see the darker blue countries are those where the enrollment has more than doubled in the last decade. And the lighter blue countries are where it's increased by 50 to 100%. Next slide. So what is the demand for early learning? What's driving this increase in enrollment in early childhood education? Do we understand it? Next slide. So what factors might be affecting increases in enrollment? Well, the first is parent understanding of the importance of early learning. We've seen there's plenty of evidence from brain science and from economic research to show that children who have early childhood education do better in life in a variety of different outcomes. But I think at the parent and child and family level, parents are seeing that investing in early childhood education is important to enroll their children in, to set their children on a path to success later in life. But in terms of deciding whether or not to enroll their children, there are some things that influence their decisions. So one is how well they understand the potential payoff to investing in that. But the other is their perception of quality. So no parent wants to send their child to a child care center or a preschool program where the building is crumbling or where they think the teacher is not well qualified. So we need to be aware of both real quality and parent perceptions of quality. We also need to think about the specific challenges that might face some disadvantaged groups. Different types of services are needed. So we need to think about disadvantage in terms of language, cost, distance, cultural expectations. And then we need to think about the different types of services that might help children and parents meeting their needs. So not every parent needs a full day childcare option or a full day preschool option. Some might only need a half day. Next slide. To bear out some of these points, I want to show you some analysis we did in Uzbekistan a few years ago. And the policy challenge there was, why aren't parents enrolling their children in preschool? The enrollment rate at the time in Uzbekistan was under 20%. There was significant excess space in the preschool, so we wanted to understand, why aren't parents enrolling? Because Uzbekistan as a country was spending 2 or 3 times as much as neighboring countries in their preschool program. They weren't getting as strong enrollments, and they weren't getting as strong child numbers. Next slide. So the first thing we did was we looked at the data to see our enrollment rates related to child development outcomes. So what you see in the blue bars by region, these are all different regions in Uzbekistan, the compliance with the state developmental standards for early childhood education. And then in the orange bars, you see the enrollment rate in those regions. You see in the blue bars relatively high levels of child development reported across the country based on the state standards. And you see the enrollment rates ranging from 10% to 25% in each region. But we see no clear correlation between child development and enrollment. So what else might be driving decisions around enrollment? Next slide. This is a correlation that looks at enrollment And you can see R's and U's next to the region, which is to indicate that we looked at both rural parts of each region and urban parts of each region. And what you see is that there's a trend that regions, whether they're rural or urban, tended to have higher enrollment if they had more qualified teachers. Next slide. This is a slide, again, showing for all the regions, both the rural parts and urban parts of the regions, that the regions with better infrastructure tended to have higher enrollment. So what we're seeing is it's not child outcomes as defined by the state that's influencing parent decisions. What's influencing them is, do they think that their children are going to be taught by a qualified teacher? And are they sending their kids to buildings and facilities that seem to be in good shape? Next slide. So some of the takeaways for us from Uzbekistan were, quality enrollment are linked, and that parent perceptions of quality influence enrollment. And that might not always be the same perceptions of quality. The things that parents perceive to be important may not be the things that we as practitioners think are the most important. We also need to think about setting the right standards and monitoring to ensure compliance. We need to set realistic standards. We need to recognize that teacher qualifications and abilities matter. And then we also need to think about how to measure child outcomes well, so that the state standards that were being used at the time in Uzbekistan weren't communicating enough to parents how well the children were doing, and it wasn't influencing their decisions. So part of the challenge was to come up with different ways to measure child outcomes that might be more meaningful for parents. Next slide, please. So what are some of our options? What can we do to ensure children get a better start in life? Next slide. So the first is to recognize that there are many different ways we can promote child development and early learning. These are just a few of the examples, but it's not just about preschools or childcare, right? We can work with community health workers. We can integrate early childhood into vocational and skills training programs, basically by using those programs to train preschool teachers or assistants in preschool classrooms. We can roll out programs in waiting rooms at health posts or government buildings. We can do home visits, especially for those families most in need. Early reading campaigns and community libraries have demonstrated impact. We can also use radio, TV, and mobile and texting programs more effectively. Cash transfer programs are a great way when parents come to get cash transfers. They also receive information and support and encouragement and opportunities to practice early stimulation with their children, learn about proper nutrition for their children, learn about the importance of enrolling their children in preschool. There's, of course, childcare, including both home-based and at work sites, there are community playgroups, and then, of course, there are preschools. Next slide. But as I've said, we really need to engage parents, and we need to think about all of the different ways that we can engage parents. All parents want what's best for their children, but we need to recognize that not all parents have the same information or the same resources to help their children get the best start in life. And we need to think about all of the different channels we can use to get parents information and to encourage them and empower them and support them to engage. Next slide. Now, as we think about this big scale up happening of enrollment in early learning, increased access to preschool, increased enrollment in childcare, we really need to think about quality. And I think that that's been a lesson learned for us at the World Bank in the last decade or two, where we've seen many countries make huge increases in enrollment in their education systems, but learning levels are either not increasing or in some cases are decreasing in some countries. And we just released our World Development Report 2018 last year, which was all about the learning crisis. And we chose to call it a crisis because when you look at the learning levels in some countries, in many countries, you have half of children completing 3rd grade unable to perform basic reading and math tasks at those ages. And by 5th grade, not that many more. So our education systems are failing our children, and we don't want to make that same mistake in the early childhood years. So quality matters. We need to build workforces that are adequately trained, supported, and remunerated. As I said, we need to engage parents. We need to design classrooms and curricula that are child-focused, developmentally appropriate, and activity-based to promote responsive learning environments. We need to ensure that services and programs are tailored to local context, utilizing local materials and languages. We need to prioritize reaching the most vulnerable children and their families. And we need to build and strengthen systems to monitor and improve quality. Next slide. And it's not just about children needing to be ready for school. We need schools to be ready for children. And I can't emphasize that enough. If we enroll children in high-quality preschool programs and then transition them to first-grade classrooms that are overly academic, are not of high quality, that's going to be a very hard transition for children, and we won't be doing them a good service. Next slide. So one of the things I wanted to talk about is private preschool enrollment and how it's growing around the world. This is a slide. The blue bars show you the number of millions of children enrolled in private preschool around the world, and the red line shows the percentage of private enrollment as a percentage of total enrollment. So you can see both the absolute numbers and the relative numbers are increasing. And when I say private enrollment, I mean broadly considered, not just private for-profit institutions, but also community-based, faith-based, low-cost private. Next slide. So what's driving this growth? One is parental demand. The second is recognition of returns to investment. The third is recruitment strategies of low-cost private schools in many countries. They're seeing getting children in during the pre-primary years as an important recruitment tool. Another factor is urban migration. Likewise, women's labor force participation, as more and more families are moving into cities and more women are joining the labor force, the more traditional caregivers of children, either extended family or otherwise, are less available. And then in many countries, finally, we do have limited public sector capacity to serve all children with high-quality programs. Next slide. As I said, the non-state sector for ECD is very diverse. It includes private for-profit, low-cost private for-profit, community-based, home daycares, and faith-based settings. Next slide. So one of the things that when our colleagues are working with different countries around the world that we try to do is to begin with 3 questions at the country level for dialogue. The first for any country is, what are your early learning goals? The second is, what can you afford to finance? And the third is, what can you or do you want to implement? And then the question is, can working with the private sector help you achieve these goals at lower cost or greater efficiency? And often the answer is yes. There is some middle ground between public sector provision entirely and some mix with some public-private partnerships. But one thing to stress is that a quality assurance system and incentives for quality are really key. So we can't just roll out private sector provision unless we have a strong public sector to help regulate and ensure quality. Next slide. So I'm going to close here with a few international examples that I thought might be relevant. Next slide. As I move into the international examples, I wanted to highlight a couple of key aspects of high-functioning early childhood education systems that we see across the world. The first is equity, that systems promote equity so that all children have access to quality early childhood education, regardless of their family circumstance. And sometimes this requires targeting effectively, either by family or by region, to make sure the least disadvantaged have equal opportunities. The second is quality assurance. As I mentioned, the rules need to apply for all service providers, not just certain service providers. The third is the importance of a quality workforce. So we need to support our preschool teachers, not just with pre-service training, but with continuous professional development and with adequate pay and working conditions to ensure that the prestige of the profession is not something that is degrading or discouraging from high-quality candidates entering. And finally, we need to think about program design, infrastructure, and finance. We need flexibility to promote diverse service provision with quality assurance. So in most countries, there's not a one-size-fits-all model. There are several different models that can be combined to maximize coverage to meet families' needs. Next slide. So now I'll go into a few international examples. The first is a program called Chile Creche Contigo. Chile Creche Contigo is in Chile, in South America. It is a holistic program to promote early childhood development, which assigns children a unique identification at birth. And then from there, they're linked into a range of different services. I want to focus in on the childcare and preschool services that are offered through the program. So they offer traditional childcare with both half and full day options, so some flexibility. They also offer alternative childcare, so seasonal programs. For example, in regions of Chile where agriculture production is happening, they shift the hours or the coverage when say harvest time is happening and families need more coverage. They also engage families. The funds are transferred to remote municipalities so that programs don't have to be centrally administered. In a decentralized system, in remote or hard to reach places, those areas can make the choices they need with the funding rather than relying on direction from the central level. More than half of the staff are certified, and they have continuous professional development opportunities. There is a basic curriculum, but there's a lot of opportunity for flexibility at the local level. Multiple government ministries have really clear roles outlined within the program that allow for the comparative advantage, and there's frequent monitoring to promote quality. Next slide. This is a slide from Washington, D.C., the early learning program in the U.S. And actually, my own son was enrolled in this program for 2 years. These are preschool classrooms that are attached to public primary schools. They have several curricula. Before and after school care are available for working parents. There's free breakfast for all students, and children from the poor families qualify for free lunch. And they receive the same lunch of parents from wealthier families who choose to pay for school lunch instead of packing it. There's an emphasis on ensuring children in the poorest neighborhoods have access. So those are called Title I schools. In those neighborhoods, you are guaranteed a preschool place for your child, whereas in wealthier neighborhoods, you apply, and if there's space, you get it through a lottery. It's mixed age, 3 and 4-year-olds together in the same classroom. There's one teacher with a master's degree. She or he is supported by a classroom assistant, so the ratio is about 22 kids to 2 instructors, so it's quite a low ratio, but because one is an assistant, the cost implications aren't staggering. And the children are evaluated 3 times per year just for feedback to parents with a really clear tools that are then communicated to parents and parent-teacher conferences so you have a sense of how your child is doing. And this is a system that has really made huge impact in just 10 years. So Washington, D.C. is a city in the U.S. that maybe 15 years ago, families with high
Будем надеяться, что связь сейчас восстановится. Коллеги, есть ли у нас шанс, что связь восстановится? Поймем, есть ли шанс. И... Ну, давайте, да, тогда мы будем завершать.
So we finish this part of the presentation here. So our speaker, unfortunately, at the end of the presentation, offered to stick to the list of these questions. I think it's quite important for all the countries. So the World Bank is a very special presenter in this regard because of the scale from one side and from the other side. There are always key questions that each country could apply and compare with itself. We understand through this list that all the answers that we can give to these challenges, not only questions. This is the decision of the government, and from the one side, and from the other side, the professional community. I guess that's very valuable slide. We move forward according to our program, and I ask Alexander Nikolaevich Viraksa, PhD, acting head of Department of Pedagogical Psychology and Education of Lomonosov Moscow State University, Vice President of the Russian Psychological Society, corresponding member of the Russian Academy of Education. Alexander Nikolaevich will tell us about the newest regulatory functions development of senior preschoolers. Good day, dear colleagues. So the problem of self-regulation has been mentioned in the round table devoted to Lev Vygotsky, and our researchers is connected with the component of self-regulation. This is kind of the freedom, is one of the highest psychological functions. So these are free actions. So this is the indicator which can be predicted, and their success can predict and identify their success in the future. Then even the IQ that we previously discussed. These are the programs that you can see on the slide that focus on the self-regulation issue and its development, while knowing the cultural tools. If we speak about self-regulation and the regulatory functions, these are the classical components that are identified: working memory, cognitive flexibility, deterrence control. These are classical components that we study.
можно сказать о том, что в
We can
последних
speak
исследованиях
that in the
сейчас
recent
уже
studies
известны лонгитюдные данные,
we
которые
know the
убедительно как раз
longitude data
показывают, что
that prove
действительно регуляторные
that
функции они
regulatory
связаны
functions
с
connected
успешностью,
with the
дальнейшей
success of
успешностью
the future
социальной,
success, social success,
целым рядом параметров,
some
связанных с этой
other
социальной
parameters
успешностью,
connected
начиная
with
от
this social
отношения
success.
к своему
These are
здоровью до
this is the
действительно
attitude to
построения
the
социальных
person's
отношений.
health and social
Но мы
relations
перейдем
building.
именно к
So we
возрасту
start
дошкольному,
with the
к возрасту,
preschool
когда,
age,
согласно с
when,
точки зрения
from
Выгодского,
the
как
point
раз и
of view of
происходит
Vygotsky,
формирование
happened the formation
произвольности,
of
и
this
сначала
free
сосредоточимся
behavior,
на тех методах,
and
которые мы
we
использовали в нашей
focus
работе
on
для
the
изучения
methods that
саморегуляции.
we use
Да,
to
ну вот,
study
в первую очередь,
self-regulation.
это батарея
First of all,
нейропсихокомплекс
this is battery of neurocomplex psychological behavior that is very popular abroad as well. We used the second NAPSA battery. This battery is based on different cultural and historic pillars. Those who know it, there is a net of methods that was elaborated by the students of Vygotsky and the students of the students of Vygotsky. So it is made in the framework of the historical paradigm. So we used the ZILAZA test that is connected and focused on the cognitive flexibility. It's very simple to conduct. I will not comment on the instructions. It's very wide known, and the results allows to differentiate and evaluate the cognitive flexibility in kids. One of the most important parameters, this is math skills, the study of the connection between EF and math skills among preschoolers. So this predicts the success in the verbal sphere. And we conducted the complex study where we reviewed the understanding of the kid of the components of the figure, verbal, counting, and some other components that is connected with the figures. This is the example, this is the task to identify the figures, identify the figure, to choose the which one is more. The structure of the figure is connected with the modeling, with the ability to model of the decimal, with the fraction understanding, decimal figure. So this is the selection and main results that you can see on the slide. We identify 3 groups of kids in the development of the regulation function. Of those we could identify like low, middle, and high. According to the identified groups, we got the corresponding results. You can see them on the slide. On all the indicators, kids with high level of the development of self-regulation go far beyond in understanding of counting, understanding of figures, understanding the structure of the figure. And those kids, they knew more numbers, they understood numbers, they could count more. And the kids with low indicators could not. And understand the 3 compound numbers. Another study the theory of mind. We used
ту выборку, на
the
которой это
selection,
проводилось, и мы использовали два
and we
основных
used two main
метода. Это, с одной
methods.
стороны, те субтесты, которые
The
представлены в
subtests
рамках
that are presented in the framework of the battery that I mentioned, narrow psychological complex examination,
это методика
and the second
тест
one, the
понимания
test
эмоций, о которых
understanding
вчера
of
как
the
раз
emotion
говорил Франциско Понс.
that Francisco Pons mentioned yesterday.
И вот результаты, которые
The
мы
results
получили,
that we
они
got
убедительно
are very
нам говорят о
persuasive
том, что с одной стороны,
from one side.
безусловно, регуляторные функции, они
The
говорят, что
regulatory
быть
functions
связаны
can
с
be connected
когнитивным
with the
развитием, да,
cognitive
с теми
development,
математическими
with the
навыками,
mathematical
о которых он
skills
говорил не
that
ранее.
I've
Но с другой
mentioned
стороны,
above.
оказывается, что,
And from the other
например,
side, it turns out that
понимание эмоций другого,
understanding the
оно
emotions of the
также
other
связано
person is
с
connected with the
компонентами
components
саморегуляции.
of
Да, вот, например,
self-regulation,
с развитием
with
сдерживающего
the,
контроля.
for example,
И
development
таким
of the
образом мы
deterrent
можем
control.
делать выводы о
We
том,
can do
как
conclusions here,
развитие
how the
саморегуляции
development of
способствует
self-regulation
развитию теории
helps
сознания,
to
то есть
develop the theory of
социальных
mind, understanding
отношений.
social relations.
А не менее важным для нас было
Another
посмотреть
thing is
взаимосвязь
to know the
развития
connection between
регуляторных
the
функций и игровой
EF
деятельности.
and
Да,
play
поскольку
in the
игровая
preschool.
деятельность в контексте
The play
культурно-исторической
activity
теории рассматривается как
in the
ведущая,
framework
то есть та
of
деятельность, в рамках
this
которой происходит формирование и развитие ребенка в
is
максимальной
the
степени.
background for the development of the kid.
Можно говорить о том, что
We can
именно
speak that
в игровой деятельности
in the play,
зону ближайшего
the
развития,
area
о которой
of the
писал Выгодский,
development that
представлена
Vygotsky
максимально,
wrote
поскольку
is
ребенок
the
в
maximum
каком-то
one,
смысле
as
здесь
the kid here
создает для себя сам.
creates his area
Для нас, безусловно,
himself.
вопросом было
Another question
тот подход к
that we asked ourselves,
изучению
this is the
и
approach of
пониманию
study
игры,
and understanding of the game,
поскольку существует разные
because we have different
разные методологии
methodology
измерения
to
развития
measure
игровой
the
деятельности.
development
Здесь мы
of the
опирались
play.
на понимание
Here, the
изучения
background
игры Елены Олеговны
was the
Смирновой, да, в
play
рамках
of
которой выделяются
Irina
основные
Olegovna Smirnova,
такие основные
where in the
компоненты,
play
как с
the main
одной
components are
стороны
being
это
identified.
игровое замещение,
The play,
да,
the
которое представлено
substitution,
замещением и ролевым
this is
замещением
role
объектов.
substitution,
С
object
другой
substitution,
стороны, это
and from the
игровое
other
также
side, this is
взаимодействие, на которое
interaction
представлено, собственно,
in the
общение
play,
между
this is
детьми в рамках
communication
игры.
between
И,
the
кроме
kids,
того,
among the
это
kids
замысел
within
игры
the
или
play,
идея
and
игры,
another one, the idea of the
удержание этой
game.
идеи. Но опять же, это
Sticking to this
название
idea
блоков,
for
за
some period
которыми
of time.
стоит
These are the
целый ряд
name of the blocks
достаточно сложных
with
показателей.
several indicators in each of them.
Что я скажу об основных результатах в таком обобщенном
Let me
виде.
tell about
К
the
сожалению, мы увидели, что не
the
существует
conclusions.
четкой
We see that there is no
взаимосвязи
direct
между
connection
таким
between
важным понятием,
such
как
important notion,
ролевое
so important
замещение
notion
и
as the role
развитие
substitution
саморегуляции.
and the
Да, к
development of
сожалению, мы этого не увидели.
self-regulation.
Возможно, это связано
We haven't
с
seen it,
достаточно ограниченной выборкой.
this connection. Maybe the selection was not enough,
Немногим более 50
too
детей.
limited.
Но
There
в
was
то же время
about
мы
50
увидели, что,
kids,
безусловно, существует
but
взаимосвязь
there is
между
direct connection
развитием
between the
идеи
development of
игры и
the
когнитивной
idea
гибкостью.
in the play and
Мы
cognitive
также
flexibility,
увидели, что
and we
существует
saw there is
взаимосвязь
the
между
connection
эмоциональным
between the
общением
emotional
детей и,
communication of
опять
the
же,
kids
элементами
and
сдерживающего
elements
контроля.
of
Да,
the
то есть,
deterrent control.
эффективное взаимодействие между детьми, оно опять
Effective
же
communication of
связано
the kids is
с
connected
развитием,
with the development
развитием произвольности
of
у
the
детей.
free behavior in
И
kids.
еще один аспект, который
Another aspect that I
для нас
wanted to
также
touch upon, this is
оказался важным,
quality of
это
environment
взаимосвязь
and
развития
executive functions.
регуляторных функций и качества образования, то есть фактически той среды, в которой находится ребенок. Да? Если мы исходим из того, что именно
So if we think that regulatory functions are important for cognitive development, for emotional development and for the harmony in kid, it's interesting to see how the environment influences the kid in the preschool center. And with this aim, we used the Ecker scales, which were adapted in the big study that was conducted in the Moscow city, Moscow University, State University, and there was the publication in the magazine Modern Preschool Education in 70 regions. So this tool was tested in reliable conditions, and we could use it in the comparison with the indicator of the development of the self-regulation in kids. This is our selection. This is the first stage. So we have increased the number of participants, and we identified 3 levels of the quality. And the most interesting one was that on the first indicator, the physical condition, let's say the environment, the groups with low quality, this was bigger, that was higher than in groups with low quality. We shouldn't do any conclusions, I guess, as the selection is needed to be increased. But unfortunately, this is like this. Sometimes it's material resources are limited and not enough, but they should be used with maximum usefulness for the kids. And speaking about results now, the results are very different. We saw that in groups with high level of quality, there are some components that are being developed. If we speak about self-regulation, more successfully, and we saw some components that develop in groups with low quality. So here we have the number of questions which we can answer in our future studies, because we have planned them. And thank you very much for your attention. Thank you. Thank you, Alexander Nikolaevich. We have an opportunity to ask questions to the speakers with whom we do have the connection. Alexander Nikolaevich, there is some question. There is some questions to you.
Хорошо, давайте.
The mic is off. I cannot hear the question, sorry. So, was the environment richer in the group with high quality than in the groups of kids with low quality? And in the rich environment, there were some advantages, and with the limited material resources environment, there were some advantages and disadvantages as well. We cannot for sure say that the poor environment is more effective, or rich environment, let's say, is more effective. If we answer these questions, we probably speak about the tool showing the indicators that are not directly connected with the development of the kid. There is some understanding that the factor of the teacher is more important, which is not reflected in the scales, in the success of the kid. I can't agree with you. The most important factor in the preschool education, this is the teacher. And I guess this should be our main investment in the preschool education. Let me comment on it as well. I would interpret it in the following way. Not any object environment does work itself. We need to strive to enrich it, but the most important thing is how the teacher can use this resource. Thank you very much, Alexander Nikolaevich. We give the floor to Roger Selio, PhD professor at University of Gothenburg, the historic partner of our university and our conference. He will speak more about digital childhood.
Is it on? Yeah. Can you hear me? I'm just waiting for the...
Добрый день.
What happened to the first speaker? I'm very happy to be here in person, so we can talk to each other. As Igor said, my name is Roger Selio. I come from a research group that works with studying the digitization of Swedish society, not just education or preschool education, but also other sectors like healthcare and the workplace and so on. But this talk will be about digital childhood and socio-cognitive development. And I'm also have a long interest in the Vygotskian, the Russian developmental psychological tradition. And it's also great to be here, not just because I can speak in person, but I meet the friends that I used to meet at this conference for a number of years now. I will start at a different level than Sasha did, but the purpose of education, any kind of education, is to contribute to the reproduction of knowledge and skills and identities of individuals and groups relevant for society. And it's also the duty of education to stimulate and develop the talents of children and of adults, I would say, nowadays, because adults are at school as well, and to prepare them for life as active citizens. This is the overarching goal of education, goals of education, and this is why your government pays you to do what you do. In traditional societies, and now I'm being very quick, this often meant that we reproduced a rather limited and very stable type of knowledge, or stock of knowledge, as it said here. The experiences and knowledge of the parents, of the parent generation, were sufficient and relevant for the new generation. So society was not changing that much. These were also societies where there was a limited division of labor, as sociologists say. There were not many professions, not many activities, and there was transparent institutional structures like the church and the military and so on. If we take the Vygotskian framework into this development of societies, and this will be my point, that the world is changing. We are no longer in the situation I just described. But the point here is that children grow up in social environments where they appropriate or internalize the ideas and modes of social interaction that characterize their society, and they develop a skill of how to use the cultural tools, both physical tools and intellectual tools. And as I said, in a traditional society, this was fairly transparent. The tools were the same from generation to generation. In times of dynamically changing societies and societies that are undergoing rapid transformation, the situation is very different. The skills and experiences of the parent generations are only partially available for the new generation. And here are some of the factors that are affecting this reshaped societies today. It's globalization, it's digitalization, It's a dramatic knowledge explosion. We have never had so many researchers in the world as we have now, and there's a steady production of knowledge. We have increasingly complex social institutions. The infrastructures of societies are very, very difficult. For instance, if you come as a foreigner to a country, it's often very difficult to understand the logic of those. We have diversities in population in most societies, and several other such factors that cause transformations of societies. And these are some of the metaphors of our contemporary societies. I'm not going to defend these, but just to give you the flavor of what people use. They talk about knowledge society, information society, media society, digital society, network societies, and so on. And this signals that we are in a mood of, or in a stage of transformation into something new. And this has been going on since after the Second World War, but it exploded during recent decades. And I limit myself here to digitization, but digitization is connected to all of these other issues. It's connected to globalization. Globalization and digitization go like this. They each presuppose each other. But digitization is one of the most transformative powers of social life at present. It penetrates all kinds of activities, our working lives, our private lives, the way we spend our time, the way young people spend their time. And it's not just something for an elite. It's not just something that concerns the people who are living in a very educated or digitized environment. This hits all sectors of society. Here you see a car repairman who's now working very differently from how they repaired cars 20 years ago. It's a completely different profession. It has changed in this period. And here you see the traffic warden in our city who also uses these tools. So this is a technology, but it's not like the airplane or the train or the car, which are very specific, important and transformative technologies, but rather specific. This is a broad change which affects all stages of our lives. So we have to ask ourselves, is this transformation, if you accept my description, are these changes significant? And if so, what should we do about them as educators? Or should we just decide that this is nothing for us? We let instruction go on as it have been. We let the teachers and students live in a world which is not affected by this. And you have reactions on both sides. For instance, President Macron a few months ago declared that they would ban mobile phones in schools, which I think is a very interesting signal to young people who almost to 100% have mobile phones, and to tell them that everywhere but outside school, these are the things you use. That will be a very strange society eventually. And I'm now going to say the rest of my talk is about very young children, because here we have seen dramatic changes over the past years. I show you the development in Sweden, which is a small and rather homogeneous country, but this is a development which is unprecedented. And to a large extent, it has taken place during the last 10 years. So it's not the internet generation, but this is the tablet generation or the smartphone generation that I'm showing you. And the iPad is about 10 years old. And children who come to school now have been raised with this tool in their homes, as I will show you. We have just a few figures. I know it's very difficult to digest figures, but we have a foundation in Sweden which studies internet use, have been doing that for decades. And they have this benchmarking when 50% of the population uses a particular tool or uses the internet or uses a computer or whatever. And they use that for comparison. And I'll just quickly show you a comparison here. I hope you can read it. In 2000, that is 18 years ago, this limit of 50% of users was 14 years. So the people who were older than 14 years used internet more, and people who were younger than 14 years used internet less than 50%. In 2004, this figure had changed. This age was 9 years, so it's sunk by 5 years it sunk by 5 years in 4 years. In 2011, this 50-year stage is 3 years old. And when I show you these figures, there are different statistics, but these are the figures when children are alone on the internet, when they're on their own, operating the iPad or the smartphone, whatever they're using. In 2014, there were over 50% of the 2-year-olds, 75% of the 3-year-olds, and well over 90% of the 7-year-olds were active on the internet on their own. In 2015, we had 2/3 of the 2-year-olds were active, and 32%, almost a third of all 2 to 3-year-olds, of all 2-year-olds were active on the internet every day, week in and week out. And in 2017, these figures have grown, so it's now almost 80% of the 2-year-olds who are active on the internet. And for 3 to 5-year-olds, the figure is 90%, and for 6-year-olds, it's 98%. And it'll soon be 100%. It never gets to 100%. It's very difficult to reach 100%. But we have completed this mission of putting information technology, tablets, into the hands of very, very young children. And here you see the same, you see it as an image here, in a histogram. You see that this development in 2013 among the 2-year-olds, you had 45%, and in 2017 it was almost 80%. And when you come over on the right-hand side here, you see you already have very high figures. Here the children are 6, and here 5, and here they are 6, and you're almost up to 100% in 2017. And this is an amazing development. And I would argue that we have never seen a childhood change that quickly, because these are digital childhoods where young children spend a lot of time with these activities. Here you see the daily use, but it's basically the same figure. So the point of what I'm saying is that the world is changing, and what are we as educators going to do about that? Are we standing next and looking at this development, or do we take some measures to adapt to it? And these tools are everywhere in the hands of children. This is not surprising, because there is a specific technology or series of developments which have led to this situation. It's not by random that 2-year-olds, and in the next study, they will start with children of 18 months in the comparisons. It's not by random that this happens, because it depends on the fact that we have mobile digital devices which we carry with us in our pockets, and they are very flexible. You don't have to go and sit at a table. We have connectivity, constant connectivity nowadays, and we have the smartphone, and in particular the tablet. In the Swedish context, we used to have computers in preschools, but they were usually standing in the corner and not being used very much, except for children who needed some kind of extra activities. But with the tablet, the technology has brought into the activity, into the interaction between teachers and preschool teachers and pupils. It's used for telling stories, playing music, and so on. And a very important feature of this, why children can operate this, is that we have a touch screen. So you don't have to write letters or numbers necessarily, but you have a touch screen when you navigate. And the latest addition to this are the apps. We have millions of apps now. And many of these apps, a very high percentage, are geared towards children. Not necessarily small children, but children in various forms. So this is the technological explanation why these 2-year-olds sit with these tools around them now. So how does this development connect to Vygotskian ideas? If we try to see this in the Vygotskian light, what will this mean for children's development? What will this mean for their cognitive, emotional, and so on development? I think that is a very interesting question. You can see the learning trajectories here if you analyze this data from the foundation. Children begin at the age of 2, or even before 2, by watching TV, video clips, simple games, and they also use some educational apps which are in a game form. Then as they grow older, they add activities which are more complex. They begin to send pictures first and then write texts or very short messages to their friends. They begin to enter chat forums. They learn to write, which they do on the touchscreen, and they have the first contacts with social media. And by the age of 10 or 11, this is going down every year. Most of them have a regular digital life. And this is, I think, very interesting, and we should keep that in mind. we shouldn't discuss this issue as if should we introduce digital tools and tablets into preschools, because children already live digital lives. That is their life, a big part of their life. Measured in terms of hours, it's a lot of their time that they spend in these activities. So what are the consequences of this digitization and for organizing a developmental and pedagogical interesting approach to it? Because children do not necessarily learn anything by just having tablets in their hands. You have to have some sort of educational design, some sort of idea, some sort of curriculum. Well, I think one interesting point is that besides what I said, that we already, all of us here already live digital lives. It's not something that is out there. It is part of us. We spend many hours on this. One obvious consequence of this is that schools have lost control over many elements of children's development and children's learning. Even if we do not introduce this in a systematic manner in schools and preschools, children have these tools at home, and they have an enormous power and attraction for them. We rely more and more to an extent on external thinking tools in most of our activities, the way we remember, the way we calculate, the way we structure things, search for information, and so on. We learn to rely on these external tools. So that's another developmental path. So you can say that we are becoming cognitive hybrids. We do some things here, but we do a lot of things in collaboration with these new artifacts. We have new access points. We can enter websites and recall information at almost any time and anywhere, on the bus or in the train or whatever. But of course, these resources, these tools, they rely on earlier forms of symbol systems. So you actually have to know how to read and write. You have to develop a critical mind of understanding. You cannot skip that. The tool won't do that for you. You still have to develop those skills that we developed in print technology before. They belong to this picture. And by the way, we have never written so much as we do now with this new technology. We used to read a lot, but writing is much more frequent now in the general population. Another thing which I think is extremely interesting, children come to school these days, and I'm thinking of when they come to primary school, with established habits of how to engage with these tools. They engage with these symbolic technologies, with the tablets and so on, and they've done that for several years. So that's their home turf. That's where they feel at home. And again, how are we going to react to this? I have a 5-year-old grandson, and I try to tell him that there was a time when there were no iPads, and he thinks I'm lying, because he's so much used to turning to the iPad, whatever he wants to know, whatever he wants to do, until his parents stop him. So the first point I've already made, we have to realize that we already live digital lives. It's not something that is marginal. It's a central part. If you look at how most people in this country and in Europe and other parts of the world spend the day, they interact with digital tools. They solve problems, they buy things, they do. And there's nothing that the educational system can do about this. We can't stop this. We can't pretend that this is not happening. We can't choose our society in the educational situation. And the interesting question is, what will learning and development be in such a society? Not that we introduce the tools to learn better or to learn more, but what will learning and development be in such a society, in such a constellation of activities and resources? And how do we prepare children for citizenship in a digital society? In a conscious and planned manner? How can we organize curricular activities so that these activities generate knowledge and insight, generate skills and understandings? And just a short note on this. So I think in some sense Vygotsky realized this, even though he had never heard of a tablet or a digital tool, I take it. Because he made a very famous speech where he talked about the instrumental method in psychology, and the notion being that that we integrate these external tools into our minds, into our activities, and that changes our minds. And the best example of this in print technology is remembering. When we remember, we use books, texts, and so on. We do not expect everything to be here. But when we want to remember, we turn outside and look at things and get them back. And I think this idea of instrumental acts as a guide for planning activities and for organizing activities are very interesting if we connect them to the digital development, because we see that children grow up in a world where they learn to coordinate with these tools. They become very competent if these tools are available, and much less competent if they are not available. And they have, as I said, early exposure to such tools, even if we do not introduce them in preschools. They are at home and in the families. And there are many potentials of this and I know that people usually emphasize the risks of technologies, like we had that discussion when television was introduced in Sweden in the 1950s and 60s, and we had this uproar against children watching television all day and what would happen. But we have to consider that this, as I said, is nothing we can choose. This is happening, and we have to relate to it, and we have to design education in such a fashion that these experiences become educational. And I won't go into this, but this is, of course, an area of where you can use the concept of zonal proximal development in novel and innovative ways, both in interaction person to person. And by the way, just a few weeks ago, there was published a study on the high users of internet in Sweden, teenagers, who we normally portray as highly individual and somewhat disturbed. But it was shown that they do not have less physical contact with friends than the low users. So I think this tells us that this does not replace something. The digital technology is an addition to our repertoire of possibilities to communicate. So to conclude, what can we learn from this? So where are we going? And of course, this is a very big thing, because education is the biggest activity in society, so it takes a lot of time to implement matters. But I think we should focus on supporting children in developing literacy, numeracy, and other skills of symbol manipulation, because the age of initial learning of many of these skills move down from primary school to preschool. So preschool becomes much more important in promoting literacy, numeracy, and similar skills. And this is partially due to the fact that children also engage with this at home when I use these tools. But the role of the preschool in communicating and creating environments for learning these things will become much more important. And I think when we do this, we should not borrow the tradition of the school, of instructing children. We should try to integrate this within the concept of play, which is the origin of preschools. The preschools have a very different history than regular schooling. So we should maintain that, to have play as the leading activity, but to integrate these kinds of elements in a curricular, in a manner that is relevant from a curricular and adult perspective. And to conclude, I think that this is not just learning to use these tools, because that's one dimension of it, but it's increasingly important that children learn about these tools, about digital communication, in the sense they have to learn how to act and behave in virtual settings. They have to learn the consequences for other people of what they do when they write things or when they send messages. Digital contact is much more abstract. It's easier to communicate things that you later regret. I think all of us have done that. We must educate them about the dangers and challenges of these situations, and we must develop a democratic and critical mindset which is relevant for a digital society and for a participatory democracy. We cannot pretend that this is not happening. The question we must ask ourselves, what are the relevant pedagogical practices that will carry children into the future? Thank you very much.
Спасибо, Рогер.
Thank you, Roger. I think you made very valuable insights and highlights on the digital resource and digitalization. On the other hand, you specified the ethical points which emerge out of these things and the new challenges for personal development. Do you have any questions to Professor Celia? It's not a question, it's just a comment. Digital learning, it's another thing people try to scare us with. This is something natural, this is natural transformation of education. At some point of time, oral training, when the teacher was explaining, was replaced with written education, with books. And then we remember when TV appeared, and we thought that the documentaries will become the only way of teaching. And we survived through those times, and the teachers did not disappear. Moreover, preschool teachers, and it's the same challenge. We should not fear that. Everything is digital around us. What we can do? School is digital. We should not transform. We should be integrated. Our traditional values, and they remain the same. I cannot hear without the microphone. The only thing which is the most valuable in life is human communication. Let us not allow our children to get rid of the bad things that they can enjoy.
I think what the account you gave is very relevant, because when popular literacy was introduced, many people reacted in the same way. Why should people learn to read? Why should girls learn to read? They will stay at home and mind for the children and the husband and so on. And I think we meet these new changes with our old values, our old perceptions, and then you create these you see it as a threat. I also see it as a natural development, but there's still work to be done. I mean, this has to be done in a sensible way. It's not that this or that app or this or that digital tool is educational as such. It has to be integrated into a plan and but that was the same with books as well. The book was not itself, unless it was integrated in some kind of planned curricular activity, it didn't do anything. It was just lying there, and but I think I think the preschool will be, when we look back in history, we will find it natural that these activities of learning to read, beginning to engage in virtual communities and so on, that was something we learned at preschool. I think that's the way it's moving. And in Sweden, we used to learn to read when we were 7 and came to school. It's actually forbidden for preschools up until the 1960s to teach reading, because it was argued that the brain was not mature enough, and so they would see this as a horror story, I guess, what I've shown you. But no, I completely agree, and I also think that it's important that children who come to school recognize the tools that they're used to, and also to preschool. So I didn't quite get what you said, but I hope I got the gist of what you said.
Профессор Смирнова, пожалуйста.
Thank you very much for your report. I think that was an exciting one. Is there an age before which we do not recommend to use digital tools? For example, we do not recommend to use digital tools for children under this age. For example, when they have some, I don't know, abilities, but they don't have some abilities. it's very hard to combine physical activity, for example, with digital tools, because children, they get stuck with the iPads. Maybe they read real books. Until which time, which age we should prohibit that, or just restrict somehow?
Yes, this is an interesting question. I think it's we must see. So, what is the competition? What if we look at how people, in this case, young children, spend their day? What did they do before? Now that they're doing this, and in the study that I reported on this Internet for Swedes, you can see that what goes. This is teenagers. What goes down dramatically is television viewing, and what goes up is internet use. And there's a balance in this. And in that perspective, the internet use is much more active. It's not a one-to-many process where you just sit and listen. You interact and you do different things. So it's a more varied activity than listening to television or listening to music in that sense. But of course, again, we must not, there will be problems. There will be addicts of this kind. People that get totally hooked on this, and of course that's not healthy. But I think there are people who are hooked on television as well, previously. And we must not generalize, because, for instance, if you look at online games and these massive online games, World of Warcraft and all of these, the average ages of the players of many of these are 30 to 35 years. I mean, it's not something that just young people do. Older people do it as well. So we have to be nuanced. We have to look at what is happening empirically. And if a technology is powerful, like the car, it will also be dangerous. It will have some backsides. If it would be totally innocent and only do good things, it wouldn't be valuable. And we have the same situation with these resources that, of course, some people can get addicted. But I don't think this is just young people. I think many adults suffer from that too.
Давайте последний вопрос, то мы будем выбиваться совсем из графика. Да, пожалуйста.
Thank you very much for your nice presentation. In Russia, we also work on creation of mobile applications to study Russian language. Do you have the same applications in Sweden or systems? How do you evaluate this possibility? Will we have more literate people entering the school, and maybe usage of these technologies in the preschool? What's your opinion? Will this be effective?
Well, we have a lot of these activities, and there's also within the European Union has been a lot of projects with designing tools where you can learn, I think, the European languages. I'm not sure whether Russian is included, but English, French, German, Spanish, and so on. One is called Babbel, which has become very popular. It's very cheap and so on. So I think this is a new avenue. This is something we can do. And people often do it in their spare time, and they may not develop a perfect vocabulary or perfect spoken language, but they make some progress. How to introduce this in preschools? As I said, I never ask what is effective in preschools. I would never ask that question. This to me is a infringement of the freedom of the child to develop independently. But as long as you keep the play as the leading activity, I think there are many very interesting ways of playing, for instance, with language, rhymes, songs, all kinds of activities, counting in a foreign language. And this is done in Swedish preschools and home. You learn perhaps English in that way. You learn English nursery rhymes and Christmas songs and birthday songs and so on. And I think this is very nice. But in my opinion, we should not instruct children in preschools. We should let them emerge into these activities, emerge into these apps and tools, and act with them on their own with support from the teacher. But I wouldn't like a measurement of how much progress they make in the language and so on. It wouldn't tell me very much. If they are happy with it, if they work with it, if they're engaged, that's fine.
Спасибо. Ну, Альфия Дорофеева невозможно отказать, поэтому это совсем последний вопрос.
So the last question. I think it's important that the parents is not useful if we distract kids. And we need to explain the kids not to spend a lot of time with computers. I speak about the majority of today's young people. They do not want to see TV programs, they do not drink, they do not smoke. If they know that it is harmful, they choose a different way of development. And I guess that if we explain this, and if we can simply do this, if the parents will play with their kids, read with them the books, these digital technologies will have its own way and its own place and position in the life of kids, and we should continue do this. I guess this is very important.
I'm not sure I got the gist of the question, but a very frequent way of reading now in Sweden is reading from the iPad. That's so these are hybrids, and it's very difficult to keep them apart. But I don't agree with what you say at all. I think it's the obligation of the school to prepare children for a preschool, for a digital life. They will live in a digital society, and if you do not engage with that as a curricular goal, I think schools will be failing children, because they are not going to live in any other life. Digitization is here, and tomorrow is digital. And if schools say that this is nothing for us, then it's, I disagree completely. Okay, we have to finish.
Спасибо большое, Рогер. Мне кажется, такие очень важные акценты были расставлены.
I think we've made the right accents. And I guess that here is the most important thing, who is the subject. And while identifying our attitudes to this or that device, I give the floor right now to our next speaker, the final speaker, who will finish our plenary session. Nectarius Stelakis, Doctor of Philosophy, our MAP Regional Vice President for Europe, University of Patras, Greece.
Thank you for your patience. I promise to finish in 10 minutes. It's a matter of respect to
That
keep
is
the
not
time.
an obligation.
Yes, I will try my best, and I will finish in 10 minutes. It's okay for me. I am coming from Greece, and this is a special moment to be in Russia, because all of you know that how our people feel, and we feel like at home. I can read everything on the streets because of the alphabet, and when I see the churches around, I can't get into, and it's like be in my own church. So this is very special for me. It's not my first time in Moscow. I am here many times, and the second time in this conference. I had the privilege with my friend Natalia Rizova to open this conference in the pre-conference meeting, and now by accident I am the final one. So I am satisfied, I am happy, I have no problem. I represent here World Organization for Early Childhood Education, an organization which celebrates 70 years of life, and we advocate for children's rights to quality early childhood education and care. And this photo is from the place I live, and you can see beside the two hands, a bridge. This is the bridge I see from my house, and I use this as a metaphor for communication, connection, and not other bad things that happen in the world. I would like to introduce you a word project, Play and Resilience. And I am sure that resilient is a very strange word for you. It's also for the Greek people, very strange. So I try to find the Russian one, which is Urgu ghosts or something like this. I don't understand, but a person told me that you will not understand this word either. Then I try to find out if there is something that it's Greek and also in Russia. And yes, there is one word, elastitsnost, yes, which means resilience. So I am not going to show you everything because I cannot be on time, but I will explain why we need a word project like this. We strongly believe in play because play is the way of children to be with other children, to be with adults, to develop in a holistic way, to be in dialogue with the cultures around them, using the languages around them, be constructing friends, and be humans. So for in OMEP, we think that play should be always a priority. And just play, not learning playing, or play for learning, or learn for play, or whatever. Play itself is a very important value that we should give priority in early childhood education. In my language, we play theater, we play music, and theater is the school for adults, and music is what connects us with God or gods, because it was a gift from, music was a gift from God. So play in itself is very important, and we connect this play with this difficult concept, which is resilience, because now the modern life is very tough, not only for children, but also for us. I am coming from a country which is well known for its mythology or for its contribution to culture, but the last years we suffer from unemployment. It's not the financial crisis, the worst thing, but it's unemployment, which is a really traumatic experience for whole society, and especially for men. And second, we have the refugee, I don't say crisis, but the refugee issue, because as you know, thousands of people come from our islands trying to go to north of Europe, and they stuck in Greece. I am involved in providing early childhood education for these children, and this is also very difficult. So we connect this play with resilience, and this is very, very crucial, because resilience is the ability to recover from a traumatic experience. And believe me, not all experiences can be overcome, because some of them are really extreme. So we think that we should encourage our kindergarten teachers around the world to think and develop projects and strengthening resilience in their children, resilience among their staff, in their communication with families. There is a very difficult mosaic situation, And I would be happy if next year I could see some of your projects in the poster session. I am going to show you a small film in order to understand the 7 C's of resilience. And please, I would be happy to communicate with you. You can write me in Russian, I will understand. But I live with a couple who speak Russian, so they can translate. Feel free to contact me, and I will be happy to see your work. Thank you. Спасибо большое.
Спасибо, Нектариус.
The video is 2 minutes, so less than 2 minutes. So I am on time.
Are you leaving? Есть ли какие-то... Спасибо большое, Нектариус. Я надеюсь, что наше взаимодействие...
Thank you very much, Nectarios. I hope our cooperation will be expanded and enforced, and we will have fruitful results out of this mutual cooperation. And give the floor to Alexander Evgenievich Viraksa, the PhD, acting head of Department of Pedagogical Psychology and Education of Lomonosova Moscow State University. Dear friends, during our conference, we are discussing different topics, and it turns out that we face up with some fundamental challenges. I'd like to draw your attention on one thing. Gomer said that knowledge is the third world. I guess in this regard, we digital objects is a special world. Do we want it or not? They are objective and follow their rules. We can not cancel the gravitation law. And our task here, and the same is with this gadget, and our task is not to control it, but to understand these main laws of this new world. And this task is not simple. Obviously, this is something from the future. We cannot understand the future through the past. If we could try to do this, that would be simplification. We need to find the sides, the tools that can help us to be closer to the future and include it into our life. I guess that the kid in this regard is more flexible and able to live in this future than we. I'm very attracted to the example of the Australian scientists that showed that we do show our fears to our kids, and they start to live with our fears in the future. I think that we need to be very accurate, and this methodology of Vygotsky allows to see the future. Vygotsky lived 70 years ago and is still actual and is still typical. And Piaget as well. These two poles are the background, and that should be discussed by us, and we need to still have it as a framework. I wish you all to have the forces and resources, different tools or efforts to unite ourselves in the questions of the childhood. We are at the stage when the preschool education should have the qualitatively new level. And we could include, and we should be included in the process of the development of the not maybe global but new understanding of the childhood. We always feel that it happens with these numbers, with this participation, with this strive to understand what is the creativity, understanding the problems of the play. We have fundamental tasks, and that would be great and useful for all of us to involve into this process of understanding and do this not in a single way, which is really good as well. But once again, I want to repeat, to do this in the general background. And I guess that this conference allows to have this common sense and to see it. And right now we have the tasks to somehow organize it. I think that Moscow State University, this is the right structure. And Moscow State City University and our colleagues that could come. Not without any hesitation, our partners come to us. One character from one of our movies says, this is maybe not heroic, but something of heroic. So we should not lose our optimism, heroism, inside generosity. Otherwise, we cannot communicate with kids. That would be great if we all continue our cooperation. And I offer once again to share the business cards, to be included into this process, and we are all open for this cooperation, for the mutual research, for the development of the new mechanisms. And tomorrow we'll have one more day where we can speak in the way how it's possible about the new directions, the new topics that we do. I guess we have a very unique experience of the creation of the team product, not taking into consideration some particular political conditions. People, if they want, they can achieve a lot. So I thank you all. I'm very grateful to all of you. I think that our conference is very useful, and we needed, for all of us, to do this optimistic matter that we can devote ourselves fully. So I thank you all for this participation, and I hope for future cooperation. Thank you very much. The next conference is everything will be good, and we'll have forces and resources. We are going to conduct the 1st of June in Moscow, I guess, or some other interesting places. So nature and political conditions will allow us to do this. That will be in 2019. So this is in Russian holiday, the Day of Defense of the Kids. So thank you very much.
У вас хватило сил? У вас хватило сил?
Да.
Светочка. Ой. Свет, я хотел выразить свое вам восхищение вашей секцией. Да, вы молодцы вообще, особенно вы вот с вашей...